All right, everybody. We are going to give folks just another minute or so to come in. We just hit start, so all of you could start coming in slowly here. We've got a couple hundred people signed up to be on this webinar, so we want to let them trickle in for a minute. We're going to be talking about state and local government webinar today. Um, so, Angela, while before we get started, I'll just throw this out there. I know you guys talk about the SLG market. We talk about the SLED market a lot. So we throw the education group in there as well. So that's just kind of a small difference here, but we'll get going. Let's give it another 30 seconds and then we'll get going.
Okay, sounds good.
And then if you are coming in, you'll be able to probably use the chat as well as the Q&A to submit questions. I don't think it really matters which one you use. I know some of you are going to bring your AI things in here, so we'll keep you on your toes and ask you some questions at some point. All right. About 10 more seconds here. I should make people wait till we hit over 100. That's what I should do, right? Hey, Travis, what's up, man? That's San Antonio representing there, so that's awesome. One of my favorite people in the world, Travis Griffin, and his family, so they're awesome. Travis, I still can't cook anything in my kitchen without thinking about how lonely you were in your apartment in San Antonio, not being able to cook anything. So, yeah, he was living there while his wife was in Alabama making the move for a while. So he's like, stop talking about me. All right, we got it. Somebody said they can't hear. Maybe check your audio stuff because everybody on this side so far can hear. Um, yeah, there'll probably be a recording made available. All right, we are going to get rocking and rolling here. This is being recorded, and that'll be put out at some time, probably over the next 24 hours or so. And you should be good. Yep. Okay, so now everybody can hear. So let's kick this off here today. I am Michael LeJeune. I'll be kind of your host, co-host, moderator, whatever it is you want to call it. Angela's kind of the star of the show today. She's going to be answering a lot of questions for us about the state and local government market. And before we get into that, I'll have her introduce herself in just a minute. But I would kind of lay the groundwork a little bit for this webinar here. One of the reasons we want to do this is just because there's such an amazing opportunities in the state and local government market. Another one was given the shutdown that no one ever prepares for, that comes around annually, just like Thanksgiving and Christmas. We wanted to make sure that you guys added this to your strategy bucket. So if you are a federal contractor that's never really looked at the state and local government, it's something you should add at a minimum just because the government is so unpredictable on the federal side. Well, it's predictably unpredictable. We didn't know it was going to be the longest shutdown in history that ended just yesterday, but we know it happens fairly regularly. And we know the federal side is slow sometimes with funding and continuing resolutions and all that. So this is just a great thing to add to your toolkit. And that's why we want to talk about it a little bit more in depth today. So with that, I want to turn it over to Angela and let her introduce herself and her role, and we can kind of go from there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michael. And I appreciate you doing this again. This is our second time together. So excited to have another chance at a discussion around alternate revenue streams for our federal contractors. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Angela Webb. I'm the GovCon Accelerator and Compliance Business Unit President here at Strategic Growth Partners. I've been in government contracting for close to 20 years, and I've been in state and local specifically since about 2016.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, you have a wealth of knowledge here that I'm looking to unpack in this. So let's kick this off a little bit, set some foundations for this. For companies that have only sold to the federal government, how do you define like that state and local procurement level, and what should federal contractors um, do to take this market seriously?
Strategy, strategy, strategy. If you look at, not to be confused with strategery.
It's strategic.
If you look across the corporate landscape, any of us that have been involved in corporate, the corporate world, you know that there's always a strategy and there's always a vertical. And so every government contractor should, from my perspective, have that same mindset. You should have multiple revenue stream opportunities in your roadmap. And I think state and local is one of those that's imperative for folks that know how to or starting to understand and learn the federal marketplace. It's a pivot and it is very different, but there are some areas that overlap. So when we talk about state and local, just to get a little bit more specific, we're talking about state organizations, we're talking about county, city, school districts, and as you mentioned when we first got started, we're talking about public universities as well. And there are some other kind of tricklers that come in that don't fit in those buckets, but those are the majority of the organizations that we're looking to sell to if we're getting in that state and local space. And that overlap we talk about with the federal government is there are some state agencies like transportation organizations that receive federal funding as well as state funding. So if you're a federal contractor, if I'm you, that is my first focus. The organizations that are seeing two pots of money, so you're kind of increasing your P1% and your opportunity to go to market. A lot of those organizations do run their acquisition and procurement much like the feds. So they have a similar budget timeline, they have a similar acquisition strategy, and they follow a lot of the same rules and regulations.
Yeah. So you're talking about some similarities there, but let's pivot for a second and talk one of the differences, and that is who is the actual buyer at the state and local level?
Well, it depends. So this is the interesting and fun part about state and local is that every state quite literally is different. And then every organization within the state could potentially be different. So for those agencies that don't receive pots of money from the federal side of the house, they can receive funding multiple ways. They can receive funding from special project funds from the state. They can receive administrative funds from the state. Locale can receive funds from local taxes from local organizations that put money into their pot. So it just depends, and you really do have to go out and educate yourself at the exact level that you're looking to sell to.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why, and I'm going to say this, I know it's a state and local webinar. One of the reasons I don't like working on the state and local side is because of all the differences and why I think it's so important to have a state and local expert like yourself. Like we have federal in our name because we like working on the federal side and we know it. To go over and work on the state side, there's similarities, but there's so many differences that I think it's super important to have an expert like yourself who can help navigate that, because like you just said, it could be different at all these different levels, even within the states. Each state has their own tricky stuff, which we'll talk about some of the, what do you want to call them, high risk states later on.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I think that's where you bring so much value to the table, is being someone who, like, this is what you do. You work in this, you know how to navigate it, and that makes it easy. And that's why, whether it is something like this or other areas of the federal market or the government contracting market, I see too many clients go and hire generalists where, like, hey, the guy that's doing my family taxes, we're going to have him do our business tax. That's probably not a good idea. Oh, the guy that's doing our will, he can read a teaming agreement. He probably can't. So that's why having expertise in this is such a big deal, and I can't overemphasize that. So, tell me a little bit about some of the bigger misconceptions that federal contractors have or bring with them over to the state and local market.
So that's a great question. I hear a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to get involved in state and local because the money's not as good. The profit, the margin, the opportunity is not as good. And then I also hear them say, well, I've heard multiple times that the timelines are just as bad as federal. So why would I spend 2 years to get a deal that's half as much, right? And again, strategy. So that's not the case. State and local opportunities typically have a half to a quarter of the timeline from RFP to response to evaluation to award. It also is the same game in terms of relationships, but I would say times 10 in the state and local space. So in Fed, we all know that we have to get inundated into contracting offices. We have to get very intimate, for lack of a better word, with program teams to understand their needs and understand where their roadmap is. You know, what does their future look like from an agency perspective, and how does that fit into the surrounding sub agencies? That same mindset and that same methodology is imperative in state and local, because you have to remember, these are people that you might see at the grocery store. So if they
Right.
award you a contract, you've got to make sure you can deliver on it. You may see them
Right.
at church, on the street, at a kid's soccer game, right? They're in your neighborhood, and they've been tasked and are responsible with making decisions with local taxpayer money. And so we want to make sure that the benefits we give them aren't just cost efficiencies and resource efficiencies, but we want to make sure we're doing something that is positive for them personally in making that decision. So just a little note there, a little note around how we want to develop those relationships.
You know, one of the things that I see as such a huge difference is if you have the ability to put boots on the ground in the market that you want to focus on, whether it is yourself, your sales team, whoever it is, if you can, you know, to use the Army term, boots on the ground, you can actually put somebody in that city and they can go to a city council meeting, a school board meeting, a whatever meeting it is,
Mhm.
or it is already their city. The ability to connect with decision makers and influencers is off the charts better at the state and local side than it is on the federal side. I have had the privilege of sitting at the table for dinner with like the secretary of the VA and secretary of this organization and that organization and other folks. And no matter what the conversation is, it's not going to lead directly back to a contract. It's just not.
Correct.
It's just not
Mhm.
how they are structured. And I didn't even know at this one event that I was at that I was going to be sitting next to this person. So it was one of those things I couldn't even prepare for it. But when you think about on the state and local side, you're right. You can run into them in the grocery store and their emails are public. And if you go to any of
Mhm.
those meetings, you can, you know, rub elbows with these people. It's just a different market when it comes to that.
Mhm.
And so I really like that about the market. Talk to me a little bit about some of the other practical differences in like the procurement rules, the buying cycles, evaluation criteria, some of those kind of things. You touched on it a little bit on the timeline because I agree with you when the federal side says we're going to put this out in March, I always say, well, which one? March this year, March next
Mhm.
year. But when a state says it, you're like, oh, it's coming out in March. And you know you can typically count on it. So again, practical differences like procurement rules, buying cycles, evaluation criteria, those kind of things.
Yeah, so every state, every organization is different. You'll hear me say that 1,000 times today.
Yeah.
But typically what we see is a lot of support around diversity programs still at the state level. So if you have the capability to sign up for one of those, a lot of states have an MBE, which is a minority business enterprise, and a DBE, which is basically a disadvantaged business, excuse me. They also have other small business programs. So go to your state website, see what they have available, and make sure you sign up as the number one thing you do. If you walk away from here today and say, what is the first thing I need to do to go after this business? That is number one. Go take advantage of those small business programs, because a lot of states will give you a +5, a +10 in your evaluation factors as they review and shred your RFP response. So automatically you're ahead of the game. So that's number
Nice.
one. Number two is the timelines are very sensitive, and unlike, well, I shouldn't say unlike, because we are seeing a lot more amendments in the federal side of things lately. So you do have to stay very vigilant on that side as well. But on the state side, I would say it's ×2. So anything that comes out, there technically could be an amendment at any point, even all the way up to the day before it's due. So make sure you're consistently checking back. You do see a lot of movement of that due date on the state and local side from my experience. So you're all prepared, you're geared up, you've got your final RFP, you're ready to submit it, and there may come a notification 24 hours in advance of the due date saying, hey, we've shifted to the right 2 days. Because there's such a small team compared to the federal division
Mm.
and sub-agencies that are shredding these evaluation forms and RFP responses. So make sure you're constantly reviewing that. Obviously, it's great if you submit early, you look like you were on time, you were diligent, you were ready for the procurement. So that's something else I would keep my eye on. A lot of times when they submit an amendment to the original RFP, you will have to include that and you will have to sign it as an acknowledgement that you received it as part of your submission package. So you can't just read it, gloss over it and move on. You have to read it, add it to your package, sign it before you submit. Just make sure that that's not a requirement or is a requirement that you're following it.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll note is that we see a lot, and it again depends on the state. We see a lot of requests for both in-person and virtual or digital submissions. So you will see someone ask you to mail a hard paper copy to that location as well as submit it digitally. Once in a blue moon, you will see them say, we want you to physically bring it to the location.
Mhm.
So from my experience, if they're asking you to physically bring it to the location, they want a local vendor. So when you're shredding these to look through them to see, hey, do we qualify? Is this something we should go after? If they're asking for you to be in person to deliver it, that is a flag for me that says, I might not want to go after this because they're looking for somebody either in that exact location or at least in that state to provide this product or service, which is why partnering is so important. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But those are the main things that I typically see and kind of tell people, hey, take a peek at this, make sure these things aren't there or they are there, depending on what you're looking for. In terms of solicitations in general, we see a lot of 1 and 2 month deadlines. So we see a lot of this comes out on August 1st. It's due at the latest by November 1st. But that would typically be a longer timeline that we would see. A lot of times we see 30, 60 days. Again, amendments coming during that time period. And then I'll shift a little bit if you don't mind, Mike. We'll talk a little bit about the
Yeah.
pricing structure.
Yeah, that's where I was going next. So that'd be
Oh,
perfect.
perfect. Okay, great. So it's not a federal bid. There's no way we can make it a federal bid. It is going to be less money. You're not going to get the same GWAC IDIQ awards for a 5-year term. That's, $150 million on every state bid. It's just not realistic. But what you can do is look for these enterprise IT or enterprise insert, technology or product or service here, level offerings. So across multiple organizations, they'll put out RFPs. Across larger entities or organizations, you'll see a more cohesive enterprise offering request. Those are the types of things where you can increase your opportunity across that revenue line. You can look to do products and services. You're deploying across multiple locations or hundreds or even thousands within one location. So just a side note to keep an eye out for those types of things and set your searches and your flags for those. If you're looking more for the biggest hits I can get the quickest, that's just a little piece of advice I would give. But in terms of your pricing, on the federal side, a lot of us use the GSA pricer when it comes especially to services. And we use some of the free tools, looking apart from government spend, around different products and service sets to see what's been done previously. I would still employ that same tactic and methodology around searching for where my pricing should be. There are also ways for you to determine who the competitor list is on some of these bids, and you can look at their websites, or you can do a deep dive on them to see what they've submitted previously or what they've been awarded previously and where their pricing has been. And then you kind of employ that whole commercial tactic. Well, what would I sell this for commercially? All of those things you meet in the middle, and that's typically what your state and local pricing looks like.
Yeah. No, really good info on that. And when it comes to pricing, you hit on something that it not being as lucrative as the federal side. And so I can sense the question in the audience here is, then why do it? Why go after this? And I'll give you one of my answers and you can give your answer, is simply because you can win it.
Yeah.
Like people think that because something is higher margin, that's all I should chase. But what are your odds of winning it? So if you're in the federal market, I've seen small contracts, large contracts, everything in between, where there's 39 to 40 bidders. I mean, that's a lot of bidders chasing something. And you can bet it's going to be determined by price. So number one, in that scenario, it may not be the big margin you were hoping in order to win. That's one. But number two, you flip over to the state and local side, and there may be 4 or 5, because they know, hey, this is, again, a boots on the ground type of thing. and I know that the mayor's brother-in-law owns a construction company and they've won the last three contracts.
Mhm.
So we probably can't compete with them, and people will just give up. And
Yeah,
so you may see less competition at the state level, which would allow you to compete and win a contract. I'm not saying that's always the case, but I do think
sure.
there's an advantage when you're competing against less people. And so money is money at the end of the day. If you can be profitable, profitability is a good thing. So that's kind of my reason on, yeah, even if it's a little bit lower margin, it's still profitable. So that's great work to have and
Mhm.
often leads to follow-on work, right? So
100%. So that was my
yeah,
answer. Yeah. So my answer was it always leads to follow on work as long as you deliver and it
yeah,
goes towards your past performance. So your credibility as any contractor, commercially or federally, a lot of
yeah,
federal contracting organizations will accept commercial and state and local past
yeah,
performance towards their requirement set. So it's just another feather in your cap. Listen, if you're off
yeah,
doing big things and you're getting 100 million IDIQs over and over again, you may be a little slower to come into the state market, but the Verizons of the world, the Deloittes of the world, they're all in state and local. They have SLED vertical practices. So
yeah,
everybody's doing it, even though they don't necessarily market or talk about it often. So I would say don't miss out. Don't be the last one at the
yeah,
table. You have a really great opportunity. You're in one state, right? You're located there, your
yeah,
business is there. Start there. That's a great conversation to have. The odds of you
yeah.
knowing someone that knows someone that's connected or in an agency that you can start a conversation with are high. You might as well, right? That's my
Absolutely.
2 cents.
Absolutely. No, no, great points because, you know, if you know somebody and they're an influencer, I mean, that's a huge leg up. And I'll give a shout out right now to Callie McFarland, was one of the city planners that I worked with in another city years ago. And that woman knew everything going on in the city and the county. If there was something coming out, she knew about it. If there was a building coming up for sale, she knew about it. If there was a project they were leaning to, she knew about it. And she would often reach out to me and say, "Hey, there's a building coming up for sale. We'd really love to see an RFP that would maybe do that. Would you be interested in that?" Like I would get those
Yeah,
kind of emails from her all the time. And if I wanted, kind of dirt on what was going on in the city, I'm like, "Hey, you want to go to lunch?" And I
yeah,
could find out anything about anything, going on in the city, right? Because she was in the background running anything or everything. So those people are out there,
hmm
and they can really help you do this. But they also know the ins and outs of like who's doing a good job and who's not. So like, hey, we hired, the
hmm
mayor's brother-in-law to do this construction project and we're never hiring them again.
right,
This was horrible. Or man, they've been hitting it out of the park. And so they're probably going to win everything and you want to team with them somehow. Like you'll
100%.
get those conversations out of people
Yeah,
that are at this level because I've gotten those conversations. So, one
absolutely.
more thing on the differences. How do you see like the delivery models and the teaming relationships differ at this level from the federal level?
Yeah, so that's great. Great question. This is a huge one. You need to vet your partners very carefully. You need to do that in the federal space as well, but you really, really need to do that at the state and local level because, like Michael just said, you are tied to these people. You are married to them in a way that everyone by word of mouth is going to know about. So if they can't deliver or they try to position themselves to take the work away from you as your subcontractor, you're going to hear about it, but then that's going to follow you and it's going to follow them. So you want to make sure that you're vetting people up front, vetting companies. You can ask them financially to vet them. You can ask them for tax returns, things of that nature. You can also ask them from a reputational standpoint, anything they've published. You can also use tools like BGov, Bloomberg Government, or Deltec, or Dun& Bradstreet to find the history of their company to some degree. So you can see if they have ties into organizations or other owners of other companies that maybe don't align with your values or your cultural perspective. I encourage you to spend the time to do that up front because I promise you, if you don't and it goes south, you're on the back end of it. And being in recovery and on the
Yeah.
defense is never good in this situation. So that would be my number one recommendation, especially for small businesses. Just because a company is a medium or a large and you think, okay, I can trust them, I got to follow their rules, you don't. You have to vet them because it's your reputation. And then in terms of pricing, I think was your other question. Was that what you were
Just
asking,
like the
Michael?
the delivery of your products and
Delivery,
services,
thank you.
how is that kind of different in this market?
Okay, perfect. So delivery it's crucial to look at phased approaches. And a lot like on the non-traditional contracting side, which is what we had our initial conversation about, you want to look at delivering piece parts to ensure that when you get to those milestones, that the customer is still happy. The last thing you want to do is wait, hey, we're going to deliver A through Z, and when we get to Z, we'll do a check-in. Well, you're behind the eight ball if you're asking for
Yeah.
feedback at Z, right? So we want to do a phased approach in delivery. So phase one, we're looking at what's happening in the environment. We're gathering the details. We're looking at the data that that client or customer is sharing with us. And we're creating the full plan on how we're delivering with now having the client under contract. Phase two is really pushing for the delivery. Now we're implementing, now we're rolling out, and we're checking in, and we're reporting, and we're providing data for whatever, whether it's a construction project or it is technology related. And
Mhm.
then phase three is really now maintenance and management. And what does that look like? And this brings me to another point. No matter what you are delivering at the state and local level, you should always include as part of your RFP response a management and maintenance portion, even if they don't ask for it.
Mhm.
If they don't ask for it specifically, price it as an add-on or an a la carte opportunity, but always offer them a warranty, a maintenance, and a management cycle for whatever you're selling them. Because the odds of them potentially coming back to you after the contract has closed is exponentially higher if you've offered that to them at the beginning.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Before we transition into strategy, which I want to talk strategy and we'll hit certifications and things like that. Um, Something just sparked uh, an idea in my head here about a difference here, and it's around the proposal side of things. On the federal level, they're typically looking for like value, benefits, things like that, like how you're going to solve the problem, all those kind of things, which are all applicable on the state side. But something that somebody brought up to me a while back on the state side that I had never really thought of was community impact. So, how is this going to impact the local community, jobs, tax revenue, those kind of things? Talk to me a little bit about how people need to highlight community impact in
Yes.
their proposals.
Yes, 100%. If you're a local vendor, you need to stress your ties to the community. So, for example, we have a partner who lives out in Colorado, and her husband is a firefighter. And so, every bid we do with her, we talk about how she and her family are tied to that community and how important the safety and supporting first responders are, and how long she's been in business and how she started her company in that location. And she's a woman and she has MBE certs and things of that nature. And so, you have to promote yourself. You have to market yourself within your RFP in a way that shows them you can knock on my door. You can come to my house and knock on my door if this doesn't go well. So I'm putting myself on the line and my reputation and telling you that we can do these things. That always hits home. We have systematically seen people get higher rankings that add that to their RFP response. So that would be the number one. Any certifications, make sure you talk about those, provide them if you're allowed, if they don't ask for them directly, but they give you the availability or opportunity to add attachments, add your copy of your MBE or your woman owned or whatever it is to that file that you submit. Those are imperative. Also talk about if you're bringing jobs, as Michael said, to the community, if you're bringing growth opportunity, you want to talk about that. Talk about a growth plan. If you're saying, hey, this month or this year, we can hire 5 people, but by the time we get to the 3rd year on this, we're going to have 25 new employees. What level are those employees? Don't stop at 5 new people, right? What is the level? Are you bringing in junior people, or are you creating a market for higher education, for people that have higher skill sets that could potentially then even bring more people into your environment or into your locale to do these things in the future? So very imperative that you dig in. Don't stop at surface level statements. A lot of us do surface level statements when we're talking on the federal side because we only get so much paperwork or room, sorry, to respond. And we want to make sure that the
Yeah.
paperwork is tight and we're really talking about the technical portion of whatever we're delivering. On this side of the house, we need to make room a little bit more for the implications, the impact, the growth, all of those things. So yeah, very great point.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And when it comes to those state and local folks, especially on the local stuff. So like your smaller cities, villages, whatever you want to call them, right?
Mhm.
That are all over the place. They're very aware when you put stats in there, like, hey, this is going to bring 25 new jobs to the town, which, and like you were talking about the types of them, whether it's construction or higher education type of things. Oh, well, hey, if they're going to do this, it's probably going to mean people are moving to our community. They're moving
Mhm.
to the community. They're going to buy a house. They're going to pay
Right.
taxes. They're going to put kids in the school system. They're going to shop at our grocery store. Like they get that when they see that stuff in there.
100%.
But if you don't put those numbers in there, they don't know about it. But those are things that are really important to a community is growth and how it's going to impact that. So
Yeah.
um,
They
I'm glad you
definitely look
highlighted
at
it.
it as a give and take, for sure. Are you
Yeah.
taking from us or just taking our money, right, that we
Yeah.
generated through taxes and fines and whatever, however else we're getting, especially at the local level?
Right.
Because let's remember, they only have so much money. And this brings up a good point too. So just a side note, when you're looking at the local level, those folks are not going to get any more money. They can't go back and say, oh, we misjudged the budget. We need $5 more. It's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
you have to make sure that your pricing is right. And that sometimes if you got to take a loss, you got to take a loss because you cannot go back and ask them for more money. So it's imperative to be very strict about your structure, your delivery model, and the money that ties to that because there's no do-overs there.
Yeah. No, great points there. Let's shift and talk strategy a little bit. So, if I'm a company and I am starting from scratch in this
Mhm.
market, talk to me a little bit about what should go into my initial strategy. For example, should I sell directly to the government that's there? Should I leverage a cooperative or consortium or
Mhm.
something along those lines? Like what goes into that initial strategy just determine if you're even going to do it?
So just in business in general, I always tell companies three-pronged approach: sell with, sell to, sell through. I think that follows us as we go into the state and local space as
Hmm.
well. I don't care if you're a mom and pop shop on the corner or you're Microsoft. You should have those three elements in your roadmap and in your strategy. So we want to sell with good partners. We've already talked about vetting. So we want to come up
Hmm.
with our strategy in general about how we're going to attack the market before we determine how we want to create our partner landscape. So I'm a brand new company in the state and local space. Maybe I have a commercial background. Maybe I have some state or excuse me, some federal under my belt, and I'm coming into state and local from scratch. Certifications, number one, which we've talked about. And then I need to look at where am I going to create my footprint. If I'm in Alabama, then I need to look at Alabama. That is a no-brainer. Alabama should be number one on my roadmap because I'm here. I can physically get to where I need to get to. I can get FaceTime. I can make use of my time in a way, both on social media and in person at events, that allows me to connect and have an impact to some degree that I wouldn't have if I wasn't here. So the state that you are in should be your number one focus. If you have a headquartered organization, if you're a little bit larger and you have a headquartered location in another state than where you are, I would say that's target two because you have a presence, you have a business license and a location in that area. People are going to recognize the name, hopefully, of your company. Again, marketing, social media, being in person at events for whoever's in that location would be number two. Then I'm looking at consortiums because now I'm saying I can't boil the ocean. I can do this location, I can do that location, and then I have to have a very different strategy for anything outside of those two states because we just don't have enough people. And it doesn't make sense to invest in having sales representatives in every single state unless you're a very large corporation that can afford to do that. When
Yeah,
we
I
talk
love that
about
approach. So,
Oh,
that's awesome.
so I'd love to talk about consortiums, but I want to make sure we just talk about this in relation to the non-traditional contracting, because last time we did talk a little bit about consortiums there as
Yeah.
well. So just for clarity's sake, consortiums in the federal market are very different than state and local. State and local consortiums are, I'm going to call them administrative and contracting organizations. So it typically is an organization that does all of the admin work around a contract, creating the RFP, putting it out, receiving all of the responses, doing the evaluations, and then making awards. So two good examples of these consortium-based contracts are TIPS, T-I-P-S, and NASPO, N-A-S-P-O. There are others. Those are the two I typically talk about because from my personal experience, they have a lot of organization around them, and they have people that will answer the phone when you call. So if you have a problem or you're confused or you need advice or someone to help you align, they are there to genuinely help you. So I always talk about those two. If you go to their websites, they'll give you a lot of information about how to engage and how to get involved. Consortiums put out RFPs just like an agency would. So you have to be tuned in and on the newsletter and on the email blast lists because you're not going to know about the opportunities otherwise. Once the RFP comes out, you have an opportunity, just like at the federal level, to submit a response and win. The great thing about consortiums is that they are pre-awards. You're pre-competing. So once you're awarded that contract, let's say contract ABC, once you're on contract ABC, now I can start a marketing campaign in all those other states where I am not and cannot be around my company and the fact that we're on contract ABC and you're an approved agency or member. I think TIPS calls them members. You're an approved member on this contract. So now when that agency comes to me and the others on that contract, they're just asking me for a quote for the products and services that they need because I've already been awarded that contract. So you save yourself some time by doing that up front. You give yourself another opportunity to market in a different way that is much more direct than if you didn't have a consortium-based contract. And you're putting yourself in the presence of other people who are doing very similar things. Now we're talking about my potential partnering pool. So I'll stop and see if you have any questions on that piece.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of information. It's all really good stuff. No, I really appreciate that. I'll shift gears to one thing though. One of the things I love and have always loved about the federal side is the access to data, centralized data. And I'm going to preempt this by saying, I know there isn't access to centralized data, but when somebody is trying to approach this market, what should they look for in the states they're trying to work in terms of data? So like, are there specific types of databases? Are there specific places you recommend they go and look to find data? Because in the federal market, that's literally the first thing we do. Like before my first call with a new client, I get their NAICS codes, their keywords. I hop into SAM.gov's database and I start going, okay, who buys what they sell? And I start pulling all this data so I can show up and say, okay, here's who buys what you sell, right down to the contracting officer. And we know all of that stuff, but it's different in this market. So what would you recommend from a research perspective? Where should a company focus their time to make sure, hey, I'm even looking in the right place for that stuff?
So great point. It is hard to get centralized data, but I will say it is available in certain places. You're not going to get the full picture like you get on the federal side because it is so disjointed on the state and local side, but it is available. So states oftentimes have rules and regulations around types of data that needs to be presented or published. So a lot of states will say, if we award a vendor a contract, that has to be made public because it's public taxpayer money from where this is coming. So they'll have a link off of their website, their acquisition and bid website, which every state has, by the way. Whatever state you're in, go on Google and type in state of, enter here, acquisition department, procurement department, and it will come up and it will show you how to sign up to be a vendor. And it should give you an option if they're a state that has policy that supports it, where you can look at who's been awarded previous contracts. So that's number one. And that goes back to your partner strategy, which again, we'll talk about in a little bit, but that gives you an idea of who is winning what consistently. And you can also typically see in those states the value of those contracts as well. There is an opportunity on Deltec to look at state and local data as well. So they do kind of pull in some of that data. Obviously, we all know that's a little bit more expensive of a platform, but it is available there. We also can look at organizations like BidNet. So there are companies that have created platforms where they pull in all of the solicitations that come in from every state. So you can sign up a lot of times for free to get started. And then if you want a more advanced view of the platform, you can sign up for a license. But you go in there and say, this is my company, you put all your information in, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for, you know, AI opportunities and specific to these states, and it will only give you those opportunities. But again, if you do that, and they are great tools, just remember, make sure it's where you're local to. And if you're not local, shred the documents to make sure they're not essentially asking without asking for a local vendor. With that, come in person and give us the proposal piece. So just that little side note, but they are available. And so those also allow you to look at who's previously won contracts because they've worked it through their process and through their platform. So they keep historical records. So you can go in there and look at that information as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, really good points. And I'm glad you brought up the bid matching systems. You know, when I'm usually talking to somebody who's brand new in the market and they're focused on the federal side and they say, okay, well, which bid matching system should I go with? I say, yeah, you probably don't need one. And
Yeah.
you'll be fine. And they say, well, we're going to go after the SLED market. I'm like, yeah, you probably need one.
Yeah.
you
I think
you
that's
probably
great
need
advice.
one because what people don't know is like Dell Tech and even like My GovWatch, which they have a great platform too. A lot of these people have to connect to all the state websites that allow data connection. But I know because I've talked to people at Dell Tech and other companies, they actually still have people that call contracting officers all over the country and just get updates via phone.
Yeah.
And there are some states, I know this will not shock anybody here on the call. There are some states that still send a CD-ROM of their updates monthly to like Dell Tech and other people and say, hey, here's all our contract data. So
That
like
doesn't scare
that's how it's happening. And you don't have time to do that. And you're probably not going to get the CD-ROM because they're only making like 6 of them or whatever, right?
me.
So that's a really good time to look at investing in a bid matching system is if you're going to be
Yeah.
in the state and local market. So um, you've talked a lot about certifications.
Mhm.
Um, 2 questions on this. The first one is why don't the federal certs really matter? They don't tend to carry over in the state and local, and so they don't typically matter. Do you know why that is?
So I
So
guess to be fully transparent, money, that's a source of income for those organizations. So we talked at the beginning about how they specifically are either federal, they receive federal funding or they receive state funding, or some receive both. State funding, those agencies that are generating revenue, it's coming from fines or licenses or things of that nature. And so the fees associated with those help to fund their organization. The other piece is they want to be able to closely audit and review what's happening in their own state. And so they don't want a bunch of people who got federal certifications who maybe haven't had to re-up those certifications yet, but aren't still technically under that designation. They want to be able to catch that and make sure that only the small businesses and only the disadvantaged businesses and minority businesses are the ones that are getting recognized under those headers when it comes to evaluation factors.
yeah, no, great points there. And the second question was, which state or local certifications tend to create the most opportunity?
DBE, MBE, and then the small business cert in general for each state. And some states
Yeah.
have reciprocal rules and laws. So in the DMV, you have Virginia and Maryland worked really closely together. So you got to check a state to see if it's around you, a surrounding state, if there's, you know, reciprocation. If there is, they typically have you still have to file with them. They're not just going to say, hey, we're Virginia. Oh, great. You're a Maryland small business and you're an MBE, DBE. You don't have to do anything. They want you to still file with them and submit the paperwork and certifications that you got from Maryland, and then they'll issue you a cert. So it's a shorter time frame, but there is still a process and potentially, depending on the state, a fee associated with that. So don't just think because you got something in one state, it carries over. You need to check with every state you're looking to do business in.
Yeah. Well, while we're on that topic, um, when we're looking at different states, they're not all made equal. We know
Yeah.
that. How should businesses approach like the complex or high risk states? And I'm thinking like Florida, New York, New Jersey. I'd throw in Illinois in that mix, California.
Mhm.
Those are not all created equal types of states. Do you have some advice on that?
So you've just named states that have a ton of money to spend in the state and local segment.
It's a
And
great point. I love it.
have very large pots of money, and have a ton of vendors. So if you're not located in one of those states and you do not have a quote unquote in through a relationship or a partnership, I would highly suggest partnering in those states. The other thing is several of those states that you mentioned have wage clarifiers, so like prevailing wage rules and regulations, and others don't. So I would just be mindful of that. Those types of states require that you have workforce in state, or that you have the ability to be audited in state. So there's
Mhm.
nuances around that. Partnering is your quickest and best way. It's one of those things where you could go yourself, set up your workforce and do it, but the amount of money that you would spend and time and effort to do that would be equal to or less than if you just partnered. So I always
Mm.
recommend partnering in those states first. I also always recommend a geographic map of where your partners lie. Have a partner centrally located to several of those states so you can call them in, you can tap them for big opportunities to cut down on your cost. Because when you're responding to these bids, labor is a huge piece of it, no matter what you're selling. And if you can cut down your labor costs by using a local vendor that you vetted and that you trust,
Yeah.
then I highly recommend that. You're on a winning path to do a repeatable transaction across other opportunities in states if you do that.
No, I love that strategy. Like if you can have one vendor that's in multiple, and you can work with them, that's awesome. Um, and I will say there's a lot of people that don't understand. You often have to have a different strategy per city, per state,
Yes.
of who you're going to work with, why you're going to work with them, as well as how you're going to approach it. And but that kind of speaks a little bit to, maybe I have Angela's company is working with me in Virginia, but maybe it's John's company working with me in Tennessee, just because of
Yes.
location or whatever it may be. And he has different priorities than you do. So like our
Right.
strategy on what type of work we're going to chase together and all those kind of things all have to be taken into account when you're developing your strategy. You can't just assume that John and Angela have the same priorities for growth and want to target the same
Right.
type of work. It's gonna
Right.
it's gonna be different, especially when you're working with a lot of folks like this.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't I didn't get to like half the questions I had for you today, but there's a couple more that I want to get to for sure. I'll throw out this one bonus tip around states that we didn't cover so far. I would check, and you can do a simple Google search on this. I'll even talk about AI for a minute here towards the end, but I would check to make sure like what standing the state is in. So I lived in Illinois for about a decade, and we were famously, I think, the most indebted state in the country, at like $3.4 billion in debt. So on a local level, I was constantly hearing how horrible the state was at paying their bills, doing different things. At one point, the state was making claims that they were just going to start. Um, I don't know what the right word is. Procuring, is that the right word? They were going to start taking lottery winnings away from lottery winners
Oh
to
my
pay off their
gosh.
debts because they were in such a bad position. So when you're looking at states to work in, like take those kinds of things into account. I flipped over to Tennessee, and Tennessee had a 3 point something billion-dollar surplus and has all kind of cool business programs and different things. So it's a different world to work in. And so I think those things kind of go into your strategy. And from an AI
Yeah.
perspective, I know you're going to talk about a checklist that we can give away if people want. I think we're going to send that out.
Mhm.
Um, you can probably put that checklist into AI and also put in the states that you want to work in with a bunch of other
Great.
qualifying questions and have AI just go and do some research for you, whether it's
Mm.
procurement websites in the states or different things like that. Maybe we should do an AI webinar at some point,
Mhm.
and show you guys how we're using AI to kind of replace a lot of other tools that are out there on the research
Okay.
side of things. I'm using the paid versions of the tools we're using, but that's for another webinar another day. Um, Last question I'm going to ask you before we take some questions here, because I want to save a few minutes for that, is what are a handful of practical steps that a company can take over the next 90 days to prepare for and then enter this state and local market?
Great question. I'm going to say certifications again. Go ahead and get those started. Start looking at the type of business that would be a good client for you. What does your best client profile look like? Whether that's in the federal sector, whether that's in the commercial space. As you develop that, start to align that. And as Michael said, use AI. Look at what is available out there at the state and local level from an agency and organization perspective that aligns with that. And then that can be one of your top targets. I also would recommend do not look at more than 3 states to start. Your first target, again, should be the state that you're sitting in. So use that as your footprint, as your guinea pig. Start to pull the layers back on what it takes to get involved there. And then as you do that, look at the next state and the next state. I would not do more than 3. I think doing more than 3 will put you underwater, and it will discourage you very quickly because you're going to look at the pain points that are coming your way before you're looking at the benefits and the advantages that are coming in. So don't do more than 3. Take your time, space it out. This is a long game. State and local is a long game. Right? You have to get used to the different procurement cycles. You have to understand who's doing what. I always say who's who in the zoo, right? Who's the procurement officer? How do I sign up? What information is coming to me? How do I use this data? There's a lot of different things you're going to learn along the way. So give yourself grace, give yourself space, and take the time.
Yeah, I love that advice. And there's several note takers in here today. Hopefully they've grabbed all your little quotes because you've had like a dozen really good little quotes that I think are awesome for people to remember. But one of them that I'm going to reiterate there is like the space and time. Understand that regardless of the roadmap Angela lays out for you, once you start hitting the ground running and you're implementing this stuff, there's a learning curve. And if you're a first-time business owner, you're trying to figure out how to be a business owner, how to make, produce, deliver the products or services that you make. You are trying to figure out how to just run your business, how to hire people, how to market your stuff. And now you're trying to add new markets. So give yourself the time, like you said, the grace and space there on it, so that you can actually be successful. Because that to me is what makes most business owners very successful, is they understand the long game and how to play it, and that they're learning. And don't feel like if you screw up your first bid or you did something wrong and you lost or whatever, it's okay. We all learn. So just pick yourself up and try again. And again, well, how many times should you try? Until you win. So
Until
just
you
keep
win.
going until you win, and you will.
Can win.
There's too many people that I do call them quitters, and there's just no other word for it, where they come to me and they say, well, I've tried that, it doesn't work. Well, how many times you try? Well, I tried it once. Okay, well, we've all lost once, usually the first time we tried something. So try again, and you will get there. So I want to thank you, Angela, for coming on and sharing your expertise. Like I said, there's probably another 10 or 15 questions that I didn't get to, but there was so much value in what we had. I really appreciate hitting this stuff. I want to make it very conversational and have a good flow and leave a few minutes for questions here. So if you have questions, go ahead and either drop them in the chat or the Q&A, whatever works best for you. We're going to be editing this and put it out, as well as there is a free checklist that's going to be sent out to all the attendees. You'll get that as well. Angela, I want to give you like some closing remarks here if you want, while we're waiting for questions, because I'm seeing not a lot of questions. I'm seeing a lot of AI note takers doing their thing in here. So what are your kind of like final thoughts that you want to leave folks with?
Well, I mean, I think your advice is fantastic, and I can't echo that enough. You will win. You can do this. It seems impossible at first. It's a lot to take on. You take one small bite at a time. And don't get discouraged. It's going to be hard not to, but I promise you can do this. It's like when you get in line. I'm going to use the grocery store again. Maybe I need to get groceries. I keep bringing that up today. Get in line at the grocery store. There's people in front of you. There's people that have been waiting there longer than you. So you're going to wait your turn in line. And every time someone gets through, you're one step closer. You're one response closer. You're one evaluation inching closer. So you just have to remind yourself that you can do it, that you can win this. Everybody who has a state and local contract didn't have one at one time. So just stay positive and make sure that you're reaching out to free resources. Obviously, our information is on the website. We certainly provide consulting services around state and local, help you come up with a roadmap, help you figure out your plan. We are doing some train the trainer type models where we come in and teach you what you need, and then we step away and we're here if you need us. But a few months of engagement and making sure your team's up to speed, and then you're off to the races. But in general, use your resources, and good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah. I love that example of the grocery store, like you're just kind of waiting your turn, because I do think a lot of folks don't take that into consideration, because we're typically, as business owners and just people, we're very focused on ourselves, right? We don't necessarily realize that Susan over here has been positioning and working with the government for a year and not won anything, but she's been
Right.
learning and submitting. And
Mhm.
now, you know what? It's Susan's turn. It's her day to
Right.
shine, because she's finally nailed it and she's going to win. And she beats us. And we're like, why did Susan beat us? Because she's been putting in the work for a
Yeah.
year. That's why
That's
she beat
such a
you.
great, yeah. And hey, maybe call Susan, send her an
Yeah,
email. Hey, I'm a brand
exactly.
new startup. I know you went through this. Do you have any words of encouragement? Is there anything you can recommend me to do that I haven't done? Why
Yeah.
not? You
Yeah.
know?
I found, like, I was just at a startup conference this weekend, and one of the things I found with when you're around local business owners like this, and there were actually people from all over the country for this one, but there was a lot of local presence there. Everybody that was local that I talked to, a lot of them did the same things, but they were all sharing knowledge, and they were all
That's
like, "Hey,
great.
call me. We'll go have coffee or whatever. I don't care if you do something similar. Let's go talk. Let's
I
share.
love
Like,
that.
how can we help people in our community?" So the advice to call Susan, that is a real thing. Like, you can
Mhm.
call Susan and likely get her to pick up the phone, or somebody on her team to actually help.
Yeah.
I see one hand up. We'll take that question here in just a minute. There's a couple in the chat. Now there's a second hand up from the person I was actually going to read. It's Mike Richmond. He put something in the chat around 1016. It said, "I recently retired after a 25-year career in the federal government. Currently, I'm a sole proprietor with a specialty in writing, editing, proofreading. How do I find potential opportunities for this type of work? And do they even have these type of opportunities at the state and local level?" So I don't know if you want to hit that one, Angela.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, congratulations on retirement. That's
Thanks.
exciting. So, and yes, there are tons of opportunities. Proposals are very different at the state and local level, but they, are there. We have to respond to them. They include the pricing piece. They include the evaluation of certifications, as we've talked through. The technical piece, just as in the federal space, is going to be the biggest. And when I say technical, I don't just mean technology. I mean the scope of work related to whatever you're delivering. Technical as in, right, X of what you're delivering. So yes, there's a lot of those opportunities. I would say events. If you can find events, look at the state that you're in and look for events related to TIPS or NASPO, or even just state specific events. A lot of people show up at the state and local level for those events. Walk around, hand out your cards, and then do a little bit of marketing on LinkedIn. I think you'll probably get a couple hits quickly with that, because from my
Mhm.
experience, and Michael, I'd be interested to hear your take here. I don't see a lot of people marketing this specific service to state and local companies. I see that's more on the federal side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's opportunity to market to those contractors that are selling to the government. But I know, because I've just seen this in the past, the government will often have help preparing RFPs and things like that to
Oh,
hit the
yeah.
street. So great advice there on, you can market to LinkedIn, but if you're local, like, I would go to my next school board meeting, I go to my next city council meeting, my county board meeting. I would hit all three of those, and I would start networking with the people that are there. And I would
Mhm.
find my Cali, whoever that person is on
Yeah,
that
that's a
team for
great
each
point.
one of those, who, like, they just know everything. They're part of the city planning and all those kind of things. You just have to ask a few questions for people to be like, "Hey, who's in, puts out the RFPs and does all that kind of stuff?" And I want to have a
Mhm.
conversation with them. It really, the thing they don't tell you when you start a business is you have to learn how to market and sell yourself. That's number one. Because a lot of the stuff isn't just on a website. You've got to create the opportunity by putting yourself in those positions. And if you're just going to like chambers of commerce lunches and things like that,
Mhm.
you'll run into all the local business owners that go to all the other things that bid on all the local stuff. And you can offer your writing, editing skills to them and say, hey, are you submitting RFPs? You know,
Yeah.
if you're going to even other things like the clubs that are in town, whether it's Rotary or like some people have networking groups. Can't think of the one off the top of my head, but there's all kind of different networking groups that are local. You
Mhm.
often get 60 seconds to stand up and say, hey, I help people with writing and editing for proposals and stuff like that. If anybody wants to hire me, you know, I'll go have lunch with you, and doing things like that. So I could go down a deep rabbit hole on how to find business for that.
That's good. Well,
But
hopefully that
we don't
helped
have time on
Mike.
that. I know
Yeah.
we're at time and there's a few more
Yeah,
questions.
let's grab them.
One of them from Barbara here is there an advantage, which I thought this was a great question. Is there an advantage to going after state and local work in states other than the ones where you're registered?
Depends on what you're selling. It depends what you're
Yeah.
selling. If you're in a state, and again, you can go to every state website, you can look at what the budget looks like at the state level. And you can start to see where that money trickles down. Just like in the federal government, they have buckets that it goes into. So are you in technology and there are STEM buckets of money that are sitting across public universities and education and school districts? If there are, and that's what you sell, then yeah, absolutely. Those are going to be the states that you
Mhm.
want to go after. But it really is finding that data and aligning it to what you sell, and making sure that how they're purchasing aligns with how you deliver. Really quick note on this. Sometimes you will get paid up front for the whole project. Sometimes they will pay you at the beginning, they will pay you in a milestone, they'll pay you at the end. Sometimes they'll only pay you milestone payments. So
Yeah.
you need to make sure that you're looking at the organization, how they pay as well, to make sure that aligns with your delivery methods. But that would be my advice.
Yeah. Great advice. So I'm gonna give you guys some advice that's worth the price of admission today here. If you are looking to sell something, especially something very common, and you don't know where to start, we gave you some advice on like some of the meetings to go to. But another thing you can do, and Google's not the greatest source for this, but AI is. If you're on a paid version of ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is, I would set up a search that says exactly what you sell. These are the services, products, whatever we sell. I want you to look in whatever city it is. So, like, I live right outside Johnson City. I want you to look in the city of Johnson City, Bristol, and Kingsport, because those are all three, those are our tri cities here. I want you to look through their state and local websites, community based websites, all that kind of stuff. And I want you to look at opportunities like RFPs, things like that. I want you to look for news articles on schools that are being built, new construction,
Yes.
whatever. And it will go out and search and just dump you all kinds of articles and
Mhm.
things to give you some ideas on, is the community buying the thing you sell?
Mhm.
And you'll find that's a great way to do it. I gave you the short version of that. I didn't give you a full AI prompt, but I'd write a paragraph or two on what I'm looking for in that region and let AI go do some research for you and shoot you back some links because it'll do that for you. It's a really
That's
simple way
great
to do that.
advice. That's
Yeah.
great.
Which again, AI is a whole other day. We won't get into that. Barbara also asked, do states offer sole source work?
Some do. It's typically, from my personal experience, aligned to a product or service that only one or more vendors, a small handful of vendors can provide. A lot of it is around software development recently that I've seen where they need something built specific for them, that doesn't exist, or designations. So tribal designations, small business, MBE, DBE, they can do a sole source for that. But remember, states are really big on equality around access. So they typically don't look to do any type of sole source. They want it to go out so that every single vendor in the ecosystem has a chance to respond.
Yeah. Somebody had a question about consortiums they added to the Q&A. Somebody's asking about advice to start micro purchases. I don't have much more than what I don't actually have a full question there.
So micro purchases maybe at the state and local level.
Yeah, yeah, at that level, yeah.
So we're talking about like credit card purchases and things of that nature. I would have to get a little bit more detail around the specific question, to be honest, to be able to feel like I'm giving a qualified answer.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, let me flip over the Q. There's so many questions in here. Um, let's see, trying to find the good ones here because I know we're over on time. What do you say to me? Okay, here's a good one. How well does past performance in the federal government help with the state and local?
It's fantastic. It shows that you have a history of delivering. They can pick up the phone and call the person who you've listed in your past performance reference at the government. You can also ask your, and I'm sure you're very aware of this, CPARs. So you can get a copy of your CPARs and include it if you're allowed to include attachments or addendums to your submission package. Or you can just, again, note the name of the person so they can call in. You can ask for a letter, which if CPARs are available, the government's typically not going to also give you a letter, but you can always ask for a letter of recommendation based off of the work that you've done. So it's
Yeah.
huge. You've delivered at the federal level. You're still an active contractor. And depending on the depth and breadth of what you've delivered and what they're asking for, it could be a direct and the most relevant form
Yeah.
for you to showcase the ability to deliver. So I think it's one of the best things you can do.
Awesome. Well, I know we're over on time and I want to respect everybody's time. So we're capturing all of this stuff and the Q&A, I think we'll just wind up having to email some folks because it's
Sure.
hard to just pick one or two and be like, oh, I'm missing the other ones in this because we could probably spend another 30 minutes in Q&A. And again, I really want to respect everybody's time. I know we're all super busy. So I'll thank you again, Angela. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. If anybody is curious about their strategy and what they should be doing, reach out to Angela and her team.
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's a better plug than just do that. Start there with your questions. And Angela, do you want to go ahead and just pop your email into the chat to make sure people can
Sure.
grab that? I know we're going to email people out, but in case that may take 24 hours, but this way, if somebody wants to reach out to you today, they can move to the front of the line in the grocery store instead of
Yes,
being, 18
absolutely.
people back, right? When they always open the lane, like you can be first in the lane, instead of way at the back of the line. So if you just,
Exactly. Okay, so I'm
yeah,
adding it here, but it's angela.webb@strategicgrowthpartners.com.
I feel like I need to go to the grocery store too. So,
I don't
so
know why my brain was on
yeah.
that.
Are you going to be
I
at
need
the
to.
Are you going to be at the SAME conference next week? I think Bill Powell is the only one going to be
I'm
there.
not. I'll be at the
Okay.
8A conference in January, and then I'll
Okay.
actually be in December. I'll be at the ITSEC conference down in Orlando. So if
Okay. Well,
anyone's
I'll
going
see
to
you.
that,
I'll see you
yeah.
at the 8A conference. That's awesome.
Okay.
I assume you may go to Vets as well. That's going to be in New Orleans in May, I think. I will be at the SAME conference next week in Phoenix. So if you're there, come grab me, say hi. We'd love to chat with you. All right,
Sounds
everybody.
good.
Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you for coming
Michael.
today.
And
Really
thank you,
appreciate
everyone.
everybody for popping in and spending some time with us. We value your time and just love spending a little bit of it with you here. So we'll see you
Yeah.
back next time.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye.